That's a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, and everybody have a safe and wonderful New Year.
Good morning,
Tony Caravan.
You've been subjected to a highly sophisticated form of propaganda.
It's just what you need, and not what you don't.
Okay.
Oh, no.
It's the holiday season.
Yeah, it's the holiday season. I'm so glad he has to sing that now and not me. As the recordings played earlier.
good morning.
It's the beginning of the working week, the start of the rat race for those who are the wage slaves of the former United States and around the world. All parts east, west, north, and south. It's November 6th, 2021, 1521 for some people. Depends on how you look at the calendar. And
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
I got my coffee warmer on, my hat on. Backwards. No wonder I messed this up. Even when I do it off camera, I do it backwards. It's crazy. Slept till about 3 today. Kind of. The title card today, I'm seeing things, is, and the title of the show, the title card says, The Earth Erupting and How Foolish and Fragile We Are. And for some reason I put the first, whatever you call it, the chat up as the rat race continues. And the Earth erupting. And we'll get into that shortly once we get through all of our usual things that we deal with. Primarily, let's take a quick look at
The Weather Watch forecast.
And this is a little bit different than we've seen in a while. We see the Pacific Northwest kind of getting a pummeling, which I'm pretty sure that the higher elevations in California, Nevada, Northern California, Nevada area are probably, and up in the Pacific Northwest, are probably getting some snow, and there's probably rain on the coast. Canada is as well. You could see the southerly flow continues coming from basically the South Pacific. If you look down here at the tip of Baja Peninsula, across Mexico, through southern Texas, New Orleans, and then making its way up through the southeast into the mid-Atlantic states up to the northeast. And the further up you get, the thicker the clouds are. I would anticipate that you're probably seeing some kind of snow in New England, maybe some lake effect snow, but I know in this area in the mid-Atlantic states where I currently reside, the temperature outside is 45 degrees, and today is 100% chance of rain, and the temperature is going to get up to 57 degrees. But overnight, it's going to go down to 25, and the high tomorrow will below zero Celsius, below freezing Fahrenheit, and stay that way. So we're going to have like approximately, 36 hours of freezing after this day of all rain. So I imagine tomorrow is going to be a very slick day from the Ohio Valley into the mid-Atlantic and working its way through the northeastern states. And like I say, you can see the heavy clouds that are picking up that way that seem to just from the Midwest, mid-Atlantic, and on the mid-Atlantic latitude all the way up into the Northeast and into Canada. And you can just take a little glance at this spot where you live, depending on how bright the lights are. That's probably the major city in your defined state, and figure that out. But if you're anywhere where I am, which is about an hour away from one of the entrances to the Northern Appalachian Trail, it's going to be like, see, that southerly flow is bringing that warmer water, warmer air, and that's why it's going to get up to the high 50s today. But then once that system passes through, we're going to get seasonal weather, and it's just going to drop. Basically the temperature is going to drop, cut in more than half, and it's going to stay that way for 36 hours. So we're in for a deep freeze. Anyway,
The Weather Watch forecast.
Yeah, so it should be interesting. And of course, those following this show knows that I have a little bit of a leakage problem in my roof, so I have to go up in the attic today if it's going to be an all-day rain event and change a couple barrels. My tooth feels weird, but it doesn't hurt. So it's not like I'm infected, but I don't know if it's like callousing over or I don't know what it is. Weird. I've been chewing normally, so I don't know maybe if that's it. Just kind of feels different. I guess feeling's coming back into the part where it was taken out or whatever. I don't really know. If you're new to this show and you just discovered this for some weird reason, that's what happened to me about 3 weeks ago. And it's been about 3 weeks now. Yeah, it's scary. But I wasn't so much afraid of that, as and you have to go back to my other shows, the story of getting there. So let's just run down some of the usual things we do, and I'm going to do them kind of out of order. So first, let's do Bitcoin. Now, if you look at the news, and I did, it had Bitcoin took a dive over the weekend. Now, you can see the date on this is December 6th. That time, 9:05 a.m., that's universal time. So it's currently where I am on the East Coast. It's 4:42 a.m. Eastern time. And so, you have like that 5-hour differential there, more or less. From, this was currently, this is when I just, right before I went on the show, I pulled this out. But, it's been lower than 47. It was down to like, right? Wasn't it down to 47 or this is 48? Wasn't it down to 47? If I'm not correct, you could see like a little up and then a down right at the very end of that. And you'll notice that the 1 month, I chose 1 month chart here. So showing the chart. So if in effect, you're down basically over 20%, either way you look at it. It started a little bit on lower, and then it peaked, and then it took more or less has been taking a dive since. So you could have conceivably, I guess, lost more than 13,000. You could have lost. It depending on when you entered, right, is how much you lost. I mean, that's how the market is in general. But remember when it was up to 66. So, if it drops down, I can remember, if it drops down a little bit more, some people have lost close to 20 grand over, within the last month is what I'm trying to say. So per Bitcoin. So that's Bitcoin. That's where it is. That's digital currency. I don't put a lot into this. I guess I'm what you call a bear when it comes to crypto. I mean, out of all the benefits of that, the 800-pound gorilla in the room is, the CME, the solar outburst, our star. and the possibility of some kind of power outage, worldwide power outage or major, which can really cause problems. So, invest at your own risk if you are investing for investing's sake. But, I sometimes find, and this show will kind of go along this theme a little bit, but not the Bitcoin theme, but in general, it's the idea as if, as I basically put in the chat, the rat race continues, but I mean that we're just going through, on this wheel like a hamster's wheel almost, but how foolish and fragile we really are. How fragile we are, which was the title of a Sting song, but how foolish we are as well, which goes along right hand in hand with that. Because there's this belief, it seems, that everything we do right now is done as if there is nothing greater than us, meaning a sun that, that affects this planet. A weakened magnetic field, or as we'll talk about in a little bit, volcanic activity, and all sorts of other things. But anyway, on a brighter note, let's just go through. I'm resurrecting the worst Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa song ever written or sung here, which is one of my songs.
Thank you.
And
The worst Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa song ever written.
And so I highly recommend you add that to your holiday playlist. And that's just a little sampling of that. And I'm not going to expound on that too much. I have about 50 beat poetry tracks out there. This is a live version. I only have a couple live songs. This is one of the live recordings. And this does appear on I have 2 CDs out. One of them, I believe, is, I don't believe you can purchase anymore. The other one looks like this. If I could get it without a glare. Tony Caravan 8 tracks, and you could see the bottom track 8. It's called 8 tracks because there's 8 tracks on it, not because it's an 8 track. Just kind of being, clever with the design. The worst Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa song ever written or sung is on there, along with EYKIW, which is Everything You Know Is Wrong, which is also available on a t-shirt. Speaking of t-shirts, I got so much stuff to cover. It's hard to believe that these shows go 2 hours sometimes, and I still don't get to all the topics. Then what? That's another one of my t-shirts, which actually isn't on the screen right now. And yes, I have a very crappy chair because people do not buy my stuff, right? Get a mug. ROCKFLUX.com. Why not? Anyway, that's that. So I'm trying to figure the right order to do this. So we'll do this in a news fashion. At least 14 dead following eruption of Mount Semeru in Indonesia. And I think I'm pronouncing that right. Hundreds of residents have been displaced following an eruption from the tallest volcano on the Indonesian island of Java on Saturday. And this is from AccuWeather, and this is reported yesterday. This happened on Saturday, this eruption. But look at the amount of ash. Imagine that. People talk about the mud flood, which we're not going to get into today, which is like this crazy thing. But at least 56 residents have been injured and at least 14 are dead. They've stopped searching. I saw in another news report at this point, and they're just trying to, get their, clear some of the key roadways and stuff. But this is the power. This is how fragile we are on this planet. Now, obviously, the power's out there, okay? If you want to access your Bitcoin, right? And when the power goes out, cell towers get downed. You're not using cell service. And you'll say, well, Elon Musk has his things. Yeah. But, you've got to uplink to satellites. And also when you have solar events as well, well, they take out satellites. Now, I'm just dealing with that, just to give you an example. I mean, this is a real tragedy. You would not want to live through this. Now, they do live through these kinds of things in this area. If you look here, this is a current map of active volcanoes. And you can see basically around the Ring of Fire, that's the Pacific Ocean, along, hugging the coasts, continents along the Pacific. It's referred to as the Ring of Fire. But, we have on our title card, which I'll just bring up for a second. This is Kilauea. This is a recent, like, what Kilauea is looking like. So, we went through that not so long ago, and there's obviously, she's, waking up again, or, as well. And when you have a weakened magnetic field, that opens us to cosmic rays, right? And even rays from our own sun, which protects us from external cosmic rays, but it doesn't, obviously the rays of the sun, if we have a weakened magnetic field, more of that can get in. And that heats up what's magma, the inner Earth, and then we have these crazy eruptions. And I'll get back to this graphic in a second, but before we do that, this show is featuring. This is La Palma. Now, this is a recent photo within a day of what it looks like there. And like I say, these photographers, sometimes these things are over the top. They're going after, the award-winning photo. And this is from the Spanish site, by the way. But, all of that, all of those glows and all those, most of that red flow is lava there. So you can see some city lights, tied into that as well. I mean, it's quite a sight, and, tourists have been flocking there. Unlike some of the volcanoes going off right now, which we'll get back into looking at in a second, not all of the plumes, the ash plumes, are making it up that high to affect air flight. But some are. In fact, if we go back to this other map of active volcanoes, down in I believe Ecuador, I believe I'm correct with Ecuador, that plume may have went up to 50,000 feet. And when you get up in the 55,000 feet range, you're darkening the planet. You're basically, it's basically blocking out sunlight. And so look at all, at any given time, there's always been volcanic activity. This is nothing new. We're not in it, it's just that with a weakened magnetic field, we happen to be seeing a lot of activity. And what I'm trying to say is that we're very fragile right now, because this magnetic field has been dropping substantially, which has nothing to do with climate. You understand? It has nothing to do with that. And this is an example of, of all of hot spots, to put it, call it as it is, that, we should be concerned about. Now, you notice that in North America there's no real hot spots necessarily. But, there are volcanoes, in the U.S. And, we always talk about Yellowstone and, up in Alaska, of course, there's some actives, right now. But, this star, this sun, this crazy ball of light that gives us light, energy, vitamin D, and controls the climate way more than some trace gas that, these loons like to throw out at us. That's the thing you need to be concerned about. So I just thought I'd bring that up. And I thought we would use that as a point of departure, that the earth erupting. And I do believe I've covered just about everything. And somehow the Christmas girl holding on to this placard just doesn't seem to fit today. So I don't think we're going to do that. All right. But let's keep this up for a while. This is Kilauea. We all watched that action a couple years back. I'm pouring myself some coffee out of a carafe into my ROCKFLUX mug. And I forgot. I forgot to plug in my heater, and I was wondering why. It's early enough that it doesn't matter, but I was wondering why it wasn't hot. Crazy. So here we are, another morning, the beginning of another week. I don't know how many people telecommute, work out of their house, how many people go to school anymore. It's hard to say. When I'm retired now, and I look out my window, or if I go for a walk today, I won't be walking with 100% chance of rain. I was going to, because I didn't really get out of the house yesterday except to feed the birds, really. But whenever I do go out the house, all I see is cars, people going everywhere. And it's not like they're dressed in business suits or business attire of any kind. It's just like they're shopping. The grocery store always seems to have people in it at all times of day, right? And it makes you wonder. And if these people even are supposedly telecommuting or whatever, they working out of their houses, or whatever the case may be, still, well, then they're playing hooky or something. It's just a lot of people not working. But the statistics support that too, But I wanted to get more back into, now that I flashed a few of these images, and I'm using the volcanic activity and the earth erupting as, kind of, just as an example, one example, of the tumultuousness, right, of society right now. That's the proper word of saying. I think that works for me. It's tumultuous. But also this idea as if, not like there will be no tomorrow. That's what some people say. This hat looks so weird that if I don't have this thing properly put on it, it looks like some kind of Russian hat or something. You don't get that it's Santa Claus, right? It's a Santa hat, right? Santa Claus, right? So, season's greetings. Let me get rid of this. Look at the festive lights and gifts and all the candles and everything in the background. But what I'm trying to say is that there's like a total disregard for the 800-pound gorilla, or what they say, the elephant in the room. And meanwhile, we live on this planet that is, is erupting, is quaking, shaking, right? All of these things. The Atlantic conveyor seems to be slowing. There are so many things that are happening, and not none, but most of these things have nothing to do with even the climate per se, right? It's like CO2 isn't going to make more volcanoes go up. In fact, things like sulfur dioxide and the chemicals that come out of volcanoes are far more deadly than 0.004 CO2, right? Which is basically a gas that greens the planet, gives the trees and the crops life, and which in turn provide us with oxygen and food. And I know I say that every day, but as I said before, I have to jackhammer that into people's minds, because 99.9% of the gases in our atmosphere are not, I repeat, not CO2, methane, or water vapor, so-called greenhouse gases. They are 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, 0.9% argon. So 99.9% are nitrogen, oxygen, and argon. And these trace gases, like a CO2, which is a 0.004, it's a trace gas. It could easily go up to 0.5 or 0.6. It's not going to affect the climate. I mean, this is like they've created some kind of fantasy. It's simply, they avoid telling people that this is a nitrogen planet, right? We are carbon-based creatures, and this is a carbon-based planet, and we have a carbon-based civilization. And that the real poisons, the real threats to the planet are existential threats from things like our own star, right? Asteroids, things like that. And then internal eruptions, earthquakes, and things of that nature. Those are the civilization ending, right? Near extinction event existential threats. And we go on with our lives not realizing how fragile we really are from those things, not from some kind of man-made stuff. In fact, it may, it obviously will be taken the wrong way. But even when you have these violent acts that they show on the news, some individual like snaps, right, goes wacko and does some horrific thing. All right? On a planet of 8 billion people, while that act is something that affects families, friends in some geographic location, some dot on a map, when you consider 8 billion people on the planet, it's nothing that's a threat to them. And these types of things have gone on throughout history and will continue to go on throughout history, right? There is a certain small, minuscule percentage of human beings, just like there are with certain predatory animals and even insects, that, commit what we would call senseless acts of violence from our perspective. But the march of time goes on and civilization continued. But it's the things when the earth erupts, when the sun erupts, right, is when we have civilization changing events. Empires fall, not so much from their own foolishness, though that's a major contributor to it, but sometimes through cataclysms. Pompeii was destroyed by a volcano. One day they were out in the market doing this, doing that. People were, preparing meals, shopping in a plaza. Remember, a couple of thousand years ago, people had multi-story buildings. They had baths. They had running water. They had toilets. They were cooking meals. They were wearing nice clothes, right? They were making love, right? Listening to music. All of those things, sidewalks, plazas, baths. 2,000 years later, in the U.S., there were people using outhouses and wooden shacks, working in mines, working for the company store. That was not, it didn't matter what the person's color were. These were Irish immigrants. These were Eastern European immigrants, Chinese immigrants, people slaving to build railroads and being, 12-hour work weeks, 14, 15-year-old kids working, right? Using outhouses, eating, basically gruel, like something you would see in a period piece of Middle Ages, which, by the way, were pretty bad, worse than, going back to the Romans or the Greek civilization. And so it's funny how we don't realize how fragile we are and how civilizations rise and fall constantly. We don't understand that we're in an interglacial period. That a mere 12,000 years, 10,600 to 12,000 years ago, there was a flash freeze, right? We don't understand these cyclical solar cycles, the grand cycles, right? That every 12,000 years or so, that the Earth or the Sun expels its outer shell and causes havoc, a near extinction event on the Earth. It's not being taught. People don't know about the Carrington event. They don't understand that if you can imagine a dot, a small head of a pin on your screen right now, that would be the size of the Earth compared to the Sun. That outburst there is, is like 1,000 times larger than the Earth. The people don't get that. They don't see the power of the sun. I mean, the idea of it, why it was revered in ancient civilizations. It's a thing that boosts our immune system, gives us vitamin D, activates all kinds of receptors. We're as much subject to photosynthesis as plants. It's not technically the photosynthesis that you're taught in a biology class, but it's a kind of photosynthesis. We need the sun. Without the sun, we die. Right? This planet dies. But if the sun, is just a little overactive, it can be a near extinction event, and has been. And what was it, some 160 years ago, or somewhere in 140, 160 years ago, there was an event that seems to be cyclical, as I've read in papers written about it. Took out all they had is telegraphs back then. That basically set fire to telegraph offices and took down telegraph lines. The equivalent of that would take out satellites and the power grid. That means there will be no internet, no cell phones, no electricity. And coming back from that, when they talk about build back better and fix the infrastructure, what are they really talking about? Improving rail lines? Why don't they bury all those wires in some kind of conduit under the ground the way they have them in some short, where I grew up. I grew up in like South Jersey for a little while, a couple of years. All right. And then I moved to Pennsylvania, home of Yingling Brewery. After that, I'm not there anymore, but that's where I spent my many years. But in Jersey, when I moved, I told the story before, but it's worth repeating. When I moved to Pennsylvania, I looked up and I saw these poles, and I saw all these wires and these weird things on them, transformers and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, what is that? Because I went to kindergarten and like part of first grade, I think, or so, in down the shore. My father had a business down there for a while, and did off and on. And I did. So I was old enough to have noticed my surroundings and be aware of all that kind of thing. But obviously, when I came here, moved west, I'm like, whoa. That's infrastructure. And so not only should they be buried in the ground, but they should be insulated in a way that, it's almost like, kind of like a Faraday type of conduit. And I'm sure there are many things that can be done to make it that way. And, when you're talking about these $1 trillion bills, because that's what Congress passes for these kinds of things, it's possible. If you were talking about a few million, you'll say, oh, that the cost of doing that would be hundreds of millions of dollars, if not into the billions, right? Well, yeah, but they got they're spending trillions of dollars, right? It can be done. But those trillions of dollars are being wasted because there's this mindset. And this is the focus I want to get through today to you. Is as if no existential threats exist whatsoever. People are going through their life. They're working the rat race. All right? As if, there's not going to be another Carrington event. Nothing's going to take out the satellites. Elon Musk is going to build a base on Mars, and, Facebook, Meta, is going to have this virtual world, right? And everything's going to be hunky-dory. And let's just do this. And there's can't wait for the new iPhone 14. Right? But simply that's not the case. We live on a planet, all right, with all these hot spots that are all starting to heat up. And like the news of the day, okay, that's ash. That's a truck. That's a giant truck. I mean, this guy's shoveling it out. You could see he's like shoveled the back out, part of the back out. Look at the truck behind it. All right. These houses, this house in this area was covered to its doorway. I mean, you know what I mean? Do you see that? And this is like an off the cuff thing. This is like, well, it's Indonesia. They get so many volcanoes. This stuff happens all the time. It's unfortunate. 14 dead and 56 injured. But here you go. Here's Kilauea. It's got is glowing. The Hawaiians, that's like it's a goddess in there, in the way they view that. And like I said, that's not the only one. We've been following La Palma now for several months. With these, unbelievable photos, but of the power of the earth erupting. And yet people don't see that. They just don't see it. Because they look at this and this is almost like a cartoon to them. Oh yeah, so what? Yeah, right. I don't live in Indonesia. I'm not on some island off the coast of Africa. And, those Hawaiians, that thing happens, so what? It's a bunch of rich people live in Hawaii. Same with along the trail of, up, if you look at North America and you go west to Alaska, that little, the island chains off Alaska. That's all. They're all there's code orange or whatever it is right now. There's a lot of activity going on. But meanwhile, I want to get this thing down. My UK hat. Union Jack. But this is a VR headset, right? And people want to strap themselves on to one of these things, and just, live in that world. And everything's going to be fine. And what I'm trying to get across with this shirt, then what? Strap on your VR headset and everything's going to be fine. You could just ignore the fact that we have a star that seems to erupt every 12,000 years, and we're at that time period right now. This chair I'm on is very uncomfortable. Oh, man.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
And it seems the main concern of the bureaucrats and the so-called elected officials
Your papers, please.
is some kind of thing. Right? it's another 99% thing. Just like 99.9% of the atmosphere is not CO2. So just by very definition, these trace gases are not do not have the effects that they're trying to, place upon them. Though people have been so conditioned that they just can't comprehend that. But that's scientific fact. All right? And that you can't fix a bridge, you can't build a rail line, you can't put out a fire on a 12th floor without carbon-based, or what you call fossil fuels, in heavy equipment. Meaning that everything that the hypocrites, bureaucrats, and politicians are talking about are going to not only require that we use these fossil fuels, but that we probably increase the usage of them, say, 4-fold. Think about that. 4-fold. In other words, we need, if these bills that they've passed and want to pass come to pass, we will need to import so much oil, gas, and carbon-based fuels that we will well surpass anything that was going on just even a year ago, as far as the use of them in some sort of combustion engine or manufacturing process, melting glass, smelters to create steel girders for bridges, the process of hauling concrete to build pylons and fix roadways and things. These things are not done by battery-powered vehicles. And besides, the batteries need to be charged, and most of our electricity comes from those carbon-based fuels. And so this whole absurdity that we've been fed and people believe as a dogma, and just me talking about this right now, this is very annoying that my Santa hat doesn't look like a Santa hat. Because I'm trying to get this.
It's the holiday season.
Thing across. Otherwise, it's useless to wear it. And so that, this is the thing. And meanwhile, the earth's erupting. The earth is shaking. And everyone is just going through the rat race and okay, tomorrow will be, like today. Just another day. Well, it's not going to be. Our magnetic field is weakening. It has nothing to do with any kind of trace gas in the atmosphere or some man-made thing. All right? That has to do with the sun and these and cycles, long cycles. You see? If the sun is no longer protecting the solar system from external cosmic rays as well. And we see this on other planets. It's not just Earth. That's the other absurdity that these people, these fear mongers, these climate crisis alarmists, don't talk about. We're seeing this stuff, from an astrophysics standpoint. We're seeing this occurring on other planets. In other words, in aurora and in the polar regions of some of the gas giants. The average person doesn't even think about the gas giants, right? They're thinking, it'd be great. There'll be like a base on Mars. Yeah, well, that'll be wiped out too when the sun, expels its outer shell. Moon bases, same deal. I saw some story today, just perusing through, some of the news. A camera caught some kind of square structure on the far side of the moon. And they were trying to say, well, it was something that was expelled or whatever. Really weird stuff. Really weird stuff. I was going to cover that, but it was just too weird. Too weird. It's just too... There's so many really weird things. It's like, that's why I haven't really gone into the UFO thing at all. It's like you would think there was always this thing when I grew up, and even until fairly recent years, where people always said, well, the reason that they're hiding the fact that there are really UFOs is because there would be widespread panic and the world religions would be shaken and this, that, the other. And so what, in the past couple of years, they leak these photos from pilots, showing, that they've, captured these UFOs, and then the Pentagon eventually comes out, acknowledges that it's real, and, they actually been looking into it and researching it and studying these, these flying objects that defy, any kind of earthly craft, seem to travel at the speed of sound, but don't break the sound barrier. And then they apparently, I didn't see the particular show, but I read like transcripts of it. The pilots were on good old 60 Minutes, that show. And they were talking, they were further acknowledging this, right? And apparently since these pilots that were originally the shots that they gave were these black and white things that were taken from like the targeting camera. But that the pilots themselves had snapped photos, from their cockpit of these things in color that actually show these things that, pretty much look like the UFOs that people have caught on camera for years. So we've got color photos of UFOs, the Pentagon acknowledging that it's real, and the pilots and everything, and there's like it's a non-story. Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird? That's crazy. If you look really closely at this Earth erupting thing, there's a bird just to the right of the, I guess you call it the caldera, where the lava is. And these birds live around there. It's a particular kind of bird. It has some kind of, the Hawaiians have a name for it, and I couldn't pronounce it, and I'm not going to try. But it's a very odd, like almost prehistoric looking thing. That white little thing is actually a bird that they live in, within the like the crater, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so I didn't even bother following up. I thought about doing a show on that, on the UFO thing, but I was more amazed how this thing that my entire life was presented as if it would be, just totally devastate, everyone and everything, And of course, I knew there was this stuff going on because years ago I was involved in some things. I lived and worked in Washington, D.C. For a short period, I even had a security clearance. But it's like, this was no surprise to me necessarily. And when I saw this stuff being released, I kind of, and how it was just taken like, oh, okay. But people have seen, Star Wars and Star Trek for, generations, and all, in all these superhero movies and Supergirl, and, from the planet Krypton and all these other, and Brainiac and all these other aliens. This is what people watch, Roswell, they remade the series. I watched both of them, by the way. But I mean, our pop culture has been so filled with this concept of aliens and, and this sort of thing that so when this becomes the news, it just was a non-story. And I don't know if you really see the gravity of that, the idea. So that, this concept that we're, and there's still people out there saying, and it's really weird. That's the weird thing. There's still certain people in scientific circles that are still like, talking about, well, why haven't we discovered other life on other planets and stuff? Don't you watch TV? Aren't you clued in? Right? Didn't you get the transcript from, the Pentagon, these pilots, or didn't you even watch 60 Minutes? Or the nightly CBS Evening News or whatever, ABC Nightly News, whatever the hell they call these things. The News Hour, PBS News Hour. And that's the thing that cracks me up. It's like, so, it's no real difference than me saying, just quoting fact that the Earth is 78% nitrogen, 21% not oxygen, and 0.9% argon, meaning 99.9% of the Earth's atmosphere is nitrogen, oxygen, and argon. And that CO2 is among a whole series of these trace gases. And, in a more somber note, even with these, ailments, things that have been, making people sick over the past couple of years, 99% of the people have not died from that, right? And it's I use these 99s all the time. And it's just like this, like these cable news networks that people, some people are glued to. 99% of the people don't watch them. Their ratings are so low. There's like a lot of 99%, but it seems that everyone seems to be focused on trace gases and these 1/3 of 1% numbers of ratings or of people who are, stricken with a certain illness or something like that. But in a planet of nearly 8 billion people and a country, the U.S., of some 330 million people, when someone says 99 point something or other people did not die from a thing, that should be, a profound statement that flies in the face and points out the hypocrisy of the bureaucrats and these people and lets you realize, like I say, that this is a former United States. It's no longer a constitutional republic. It's a corporatocracy. And countries like Great Britain and Australia and many European countries are all tied into, are various corporatocracies tied into an organized crime syndicate that kind of pulls the strings of all of those former countries that are now corporatocracies. And you say, well, what are you talking about? This is fantasy. What's a corporatocracy? Well, a corporatocracy is big tech, big data, big pharma, big ag, right? Military contractors, big high finance, big Wall Street, right? The people that have the influence on how a country is run or a corporatocracy is run. I mean, that's not even up for question. Just like this UFO phenomenon thing is no longer a phenomenon necessarily because they've actually have photos and witnesses and confirmation, that this is factual. But no one cares, right? The Earth's erupting. Our magnetic field is weakening. Okay? We may be on the verge of a near extinction event within the next decade or two. All right? Society is completely crumbling. Western civilization has fallen. And meanwhile, people are putting on, I moved it to the back. Well, you can't see it too well anymore, but, VR headsets. Right? Living in the virtual world. And things are just going to continue like this forever. Right? The Earth erupting. It's interesting when you look at that picture. And like I say, this picture was taken within the last few days. And I'll enlarge it just a little bit so you can get a better view of that bird. And some of those, you see those little red glow rocks in the upper right-hand corner. Those are things that would have shot out of that thing. It's kind of freaky. Yeah. The Earth's erupting. And all these places, potential eruptions. And I'm not even showing, this doesn't really get into Russia, which has some active volcanoes as well. The magnetic South Pole, has left Antarctica and is not even on the continent of Antarctica anymore. So, this idea of pole flip, which most people don't even understand that, and the repercussions of the potential repercussions of what that could mean. Just like the magnetic North Pole is moving to Siberia. Right? I've talked before about, the last time this happened, like in the Younger Dryas period, and they've found these mammoths that are now extinct, but when they dug, they were flash frozen. And they found them, and when they dug them out, there was undigested food in their stomach, as if whatever this cataclysm occurred, they had just eaten food and it was still in their stomach. They didn't even digest it, so they were flash frozen. That's how fast this thing's going to happen. And so same with the same with this Carrington event that took out telegraphs. And so people are just right? And so one thing after the other, all these stories and all these things are coming out, and all this evidence, all these like scientific papers and peer-reviewed journals and stuff. But there's like this certain push by politicians, bureaucrats, and some academics, that just refuse to acknowledge, all of this evidence. And it's almost like they've taken the same tact as those people over the years, you know, post Roswell, say post Project Blue Book at least, right? Which was an actual existed, and you could, you know, find those declassified documents, you know, on government websites. Just like I say, you could go to CIA.gov and you could find some amazing things. I showed declassified documents about and read it to you, you know, online about this cataclysm I'm talking about that was from the CIA website. You know. But, you know, it's the same as that UFO thing. In other words, this idea is it, you know, is it that they think, oh, well, we can't release this, let the public in on this because there would be widespread panic. Well, no, there wouldn't be. There's actually, you know, but people have a right to know that this is a possible scenario and that there's evidence that this is likely. I mean, people took the idea of that, you know, the planet's being, excuse me, visited regularly by alien craft. They took it and shrugged it off, right? And it's not even in the news. They'd rather talk about, you know, some politician, you know, or some event somewhere, some singular event on a planet of 8 billion people or a country of 330 million people. They'd rather basically push
Your papers, please.
this kind of crazy nonsense, you know, in a world filled with bacteria and virus, and that humans adapt and have adapted for years. And that if 99% plus of the people didn't die from a thing, then that thing is not a threat. Right? Of the magnitude that they're making it out to be. You cannot see if, you know, if you had an instance, if something was so deadly that it would take out 50% of the population, I mean, yeah. That would be cause for, like, not just cause for alarm. That would be cause for widespread panic. All right. But instead, they have widespread panic over something that 99% of the people have not and will not die from. I notice things being reported now where they're saying there's some case of this, case of that, you know, in the U.S. And I'm not going to get into the specific things of this, but they're not saying people died. It's like the South African doctor who first discovered this other, you know, latest derivation said, oh, the symptoms are mild. So there's some kind of game being played.
Your papers, please.
To just bring in this kind of, you know, Stasi state, right?
Your papers, please.
Because, like I said, it's the 99s. That's what gets me. It has the same to do with the climate alarmists. They won't tell you that 99.9% of the atmosphere is not CO2. You know,
Your papers, please.
These people won't tell you that 99% plus people didn't die and won't die from that thing. Right? And then the self-important media won't tell you that 99+% people don't even watch them. But when you look at the ratings, because the ratings are public information, some of these things get like one third of 1%. And I know it's repetitive, but I don't have that many viewers, so it doesn't really matter that I repeat this stuff, because it seems, you know, every other show I seem to get a couple new different people. even though the numbers look small. But I get comments and stuff. That also flies in the face of the statistics. That doesn't logically make sense. How could you have like no viewers or something, but have somebody commenting and somebody chatting, right? That doesn't make sense, right? So I don't pay attention to those numbers, to the analytics. They're just playing games. It's like trending. They want to keep it. They want to make a thing, a truth sayer, unpopular, because if people don't see it as something popular, see if somebody would say, "Hey, you got to check, this guy's trending." If I would appear on the first page, then everybody would like want to see what's this all about? The earth erupting. What's he talking about? You see, or if there was like the real views were there, right? It said like 100,000 views. People go, 100,000 views. What that looks like it's trending. Let's check that out. But someone sees 0 views or 3 views, goes, well, that must be boring. That's part of the plan. I don't care about that anymore, though. I really don't.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
Yeah.
Hey, it's me. How you doing, man?
Same old. Nothing new. I mean, it's a new show. It's basically...
It's the holiday season.
All that kind of stuff. I'm thinking of walking up in the rain later to go buy a couple rub-off lottery tickets to see if I can't win. I don't know. Win so I can share. Win so I can give. Yeah, that's what I want to do. Win so I can give. But, it's just fascinating to me. I just find it very interesting that, for no other reason that I've always been interested in people. I've always been like the type of person that's like observed, what's going on around me. And, and and I've been fascinated by what people do and how they respond to things and stuff like that, So I just find it very interesting because, there's nothing that could be done about it. I'm not trying to like change minds here because I know that's impossible. Once people are indoctrinated, you have a cult of personality like going on around political leaders, entertainers, right? Even bureaucrats. Like there's a cult that, they're all cults now, right? The, this whole, the group of people pushing this.
Your papers, please.
That guy, his name begins with the F, the old guy who has like interest in, a big interest in the pharmaceutical companies that are really making hundreds of billions of dollars on that thing. It's a cult of personality. A cult. The MAGA cult is a cult. It's a cult of personality. And, the Biden cult, it's a cult. And that Klaus guy from the World Economic Forum, well, that's a cult reminiscent of, dictators of the past. And then there's total, like, people just ignoring this, the great dictator over in China, a country that has like 1.5 billion people that wants to dominate the world, that actually has physically gulags and slave labor camps, right? And they're selling organs and, really destroying the planet, right? But like that's completely out of the news because they have their financial fingers in news media, the entertainment business, and politicians, right? So you can't change anything. In the old days there was, It was like the Moonies, they used to call them, the people who used to beat the drums and the tambourines at airports and stuff. And people would get in that, and then they would try to deprogram them, get their kids out of there. But you'd have to deprogram society now, like entire countries, masses. And that's why I say that Western civilization has fallen, and this is the former United States. And that people say we're going to save America or build back better or whatever. All this kind of crazy stuff, these ideologies that people like are, believe in. And then this fake divisiveness among races and stuff like that, which isn't even true. This is the most integrated, like America is the most integrated, and the UK too. Two of the biggest, people pushing this divisiveness stuff. They're like two of the most integrated societies in the history of mankind, right? They're like the most interracial marriage, interracial, multiracial kids, right? Integrated everything, right? Throughout in history. And there's like this push. You can't turn on a TV. Watch a TV movie, a show, a newscast, a series or whatever that isn't like dominated by people of color and different religions and stuff like that, right? You'd be hard pressed to find something that wasn't that way. But they keep pushing this thing. It's like I always say about my neighborhood, this is total integrated, and I don't know, I don't see any like race wars going on here, right? So it's like they've got everybody like conditioned and like mind fucked. They fucked with people's minds. I hate, I'm sorry if that word offends you, but it's like it's a mind, people are fucked up. And that's what the bureaucrats have done. That's what the politicians have done. And that's what the corporatocracy does. They're all about profit, but not in a traditional way, not in a way that's like a free market for everyone, to have an opportunity to do and build a business and for competition in an open free market. No, it's basically just totalitarian or authoritarian, whatever, These people have seized power, seized control. They run it. So it's a corporatocracy, right? And that's the way it is. But what the mystery about this whole thing, and I've asked this question on numerous occasions, is that as you look at the earth erupting, okay, when you hear me talk about these factual things about the sun and about the earth that are unrelated, all right, to any kind of narrative, man-made narrative or fear-mongering that they're trying to push on people, right? These people just seem to ignore all of that, which I find kind of rather odd and puzzling in a way. Like, is it like, did you see that Jeff Bezos thing? Like he has some kind of complex that's like buried in rocks, and then there's some path that goes to a rocket that's like ready for him to get in, and then he apparently has some kind of ark-like ship. In other words, he's totally, the guy's worth, so many billions of dollars, it's insane. Okay, it's over $100-some billion. I forget how high it goes. If it's 117 or 177, it's some ridiculous amount of when you're talking about, one time we used to talk about millionaires. That's nothing today. This guy's like 100. And then they talked about billionaires, right? Well, this guy's not a billionaire. This guy's 100 billionaire, right? That's so much money that it's incomprehensible. Right. And it's like you can't spend it. Like if you spend when you have that much money, your money is making money. Right. When you've got over $100-some billion, That's why he can afford it. Cost him what it cost him $1 billion or $2 billion to just go up to the atmosphere, so he could say he was in space, right, to the upper atmosphere and look at the stars, right. It cost him like $2 billion to do that. Well, that was like probably replenished within several months. When you have that much money, it's like Elon Musk, the same way. And he's doing some interesting things, but it's a pity at this point in civilization, at civilization's end, is where we are right now. That, you have, like I've said some positive things about Zuckerberg's metaverse, even though other people have been against it. I've said many positive things about AI. I mean, it's buried back there, but you see Odex. It should be Codex. It's my book Codex, which I recommend you get. That's the book I wrote prior to this one, Then What? The print versions of both those books, everyone should have. They're fairly short reads, but there's interesting stuff in there. A lot of it's autobiographical, but it's a look into my mind that would help you better, if you watch these shows, better understand my mind and my thought processes, but that I touch on all these kinds of issues in a way that's you can look at. And then there are some tools kind of in the Then What book even that kind of could help you out, and some stories and fun and pictures. I mean, I think they're worth it. But yeah, we're at the end. We're at civilization's end right now, right? Western civilization's fallen. This is the former United States. It's not coming back. No phoenix is going to rise from the ashes, wherever that thing is, this news story. The best this guy's going to do is dig out his truck, I guess. I don't know. Think the thing's going to work? It's going to be a heck of a job. I guess he's, pressure wash the engine, I guess. But, yeah. And so has this happened every 12,000 years? Is this the thing? Civilizations rise to these heights, and then, suddenly there's some, solar nova, cataclysm. Not a supernova now, just a nova. An expelling of the outer shell, all kinds of Earth catastrophes occur simultaneously, and basically it's a near extinction event. And your chances of surviving that type of thing are just, it's like you have less odds than winning the lottery, put it that way. You're more likely to win the lottery than survive the next 2 decades. And none of that is has anything to do with anything man or woman has done. None of it. I was watching, one guy was talking about, speaking of these alarmists, he was talking about the CO2 thing, just the joke about it. Not only that it's a trace gas, which it is. I mean, that's fact. And that it makes the trees green. And, for you vegans and vegetarians, I mean, you're losing your food if you lower the CO2 level anymore. Okay? It's like the climate, like one of the things that they ignore the fact that the sun heats the planet. Like in their reports, they don't list the sun, basically. They minimalize the sun's effect on heating the planet, as if we don't have a sun, almost. I mean, there's like mention of it. I read the scientific papers, all right, the journals. And it's like, the UN IPCC report and stuff like that. They make it out like, no, like the sun, and there's this sun thing, but that has nothing to do with anything, right? The thing that, at nighttime it's cold, right? And in the daytime it's hot. Right, but they ignore that thing, right? Completely, basically, more or less. But they ignore all of, like, they ignore the idea of CO2 being a trace gas. They ignore the fact that the population increase, like they try to show that how there's been an upward increase in temperature. And like they like to use satellites now. They say, well, this is because we're using satellites. But there's a couple of problems that they have. All right. Number one, during the Cold War, like simultaneous, like to when this, they were trying to show like this big heating thing occurred. During the Cold War, even though there was a Cold War between the U.S. and Russia, remember Russia at that point had, now it's all broken up in all the stands, and, Eastern Europe is now part of, a lot of those countries are independent or part of the EU, all of that. But at one point that was all Russia, right? Russia. And all of these one thing about the science was, even during the Cold War, there were still communications between scientists, right? A lot of people don't understand that, right? That there was between academics, there was a certain level on a high level, right? And that there were weather reporting stations throughout, Russia has some of the coldest places on the planet, right? Well, in the fall of the Soviet Union, some like 40 years ago, all right, 30 some years, 30 some years ago. Those weather stations, those places just closed down, right? They're in different countries and stuff. They're no longer operating those, and there were all these deals made to like, you could enter the EU if you give us your, give up your nuclear weapons and stuff. Because Russia had these, ICBM type of things all over the stands and stuff. That's one of the things with the Ukraine. That was part of the Ukraine deal. Was like, give us, because there were missiles there. Give us your nukes, and we'll consider, helping you out, right? People don't understand because this stuff is socioeconomic geopolitics. People don't get into that. The news media doesn't even, they don't know anything like that. And certainly the CIA and all these other alphabet agencies, they don't share that kind of information. But then there was the population increase, the global population increase, and the growth of cities. Now I know because I traveled 40 years ago, 35 years ago. I was traveling 30 years ago. I was traveling a lot around the world and throughout the U.S. and stuff. And I used to ride, I drove myself across the U.S. like a couple of times alone. I've done it with people, but I've done it alone. And there were literally, I drive for 100-mile stretches and stuff, and I wouldn't even see a car. And I remember about 20 some years ago I was going to make the trip to California, take that California trip. And it was like a nightmare. It was just total congestion. The roads were just cars and trucks. I'm going, man, what happened? Well, what happened was in like the 70s, you had a couple 100 million people in the U.S., but now you got like 330 million people in the U.S. So there's like 100 plus more million people than there were, say, 35, years ago. Right? And the populations, so take that, each city increased, major markets increased by millions, divide that 100 million up by, say, the top, 20 markets or something like that. You see what I mean? Couple million more here, couple million more here. Skyscrapers, I remember I lived in Center City, Philly, You know, it was one of the first jobs I had. I was still in college. And I remember Philly basically had no skyline. I mean, it really did. It had some skyscrapers, but it was not like there was no defined skyline. And if you look at Philadelphia from the sky now, it's got these pointed shaped buildings and stuff. It's like there's architectural skyline to Philadelphia. And so what I'm trying to say is that these cities increased in not only population, but in concentration of buildings, HVAC systems, and they became their own heating, like their own climate centers, right? They were generating more heat than they did 40 years ago or 50 years ago, and certainly more than 80 years ago or 100 years ago. And so as these cities grew, right? And then the same with airports. If you go back to the 50s, like Buddy Holly, died in in a plane crash, right? If you go back to that era, there were, flight, was it Pan Am and then there were these private planes and stuff. I mean, there were no major airports all over the airports were small. The planes were much smaller. The tarmacs, right, were smaller because the planes were smaller. They were planes. They weren't even jets, right? Except for military bases. And so where do you think the weather is reported from? I've talked about this before, but this is very important. Weather stations are usually situated at airports and in major markets, major cities, right? And how do I know this? Because I've been on the internet, like I said, for almost 35 years. Well, exactly over 35 years. And I used to have access when I had my early websites in the 90s. I used to be able to access this code that I would get the weather stations. And those weather stations were always at these airports, or some would be at on some building roof somewhere in a major city. And when you think of an airport, what do you have? You have a black tarmac, right, that absorbs heat. You've got big, giant jet engines taking off and landing, right, all the time, right, generating ungodly amount of heat. The amount of heat at an airport is definitely hotter than some cool forest or some small town. And that airport didn't exist before, or if it did, it just had one runway for some prop planes. You see what I'm saying? And the cities didn't have these giant, high concentration of people in all these skyscrapers and HVAC systems and all this stuff. The concrete jungle, right? And so the weather reporting stations at airports and cities, and even the satellites beaming down. One of the things they don't tell you is this, the surface of the ocean, right? I think it's down to a foot or so or whatever, is way hotter than it is down several more feet. It's just the surface, It's like the coffee, It depends on where the heat source is. The bottom of this cup is heated from the heat source, is hot to the touch, but the top isn't. In fact, the instructions that came with my cup warmer, recommend you stir to get the optimal hot coffee, right? Is that you stir it up so that the warm from below comes to the top. But in the case of the ocean, the heat's coming down from the sun, and it heats the surface of the ocean. But the oceans aren't warming. All right? But forget about that. It's the idea of, in other words, so the Cold War reporting stations, some of the coldest parts of the world, are not reporting right now because the Soviet Union has long since been, ended. The city centers have grown exponentially in population and in buildings with HVAC systems, just like airports have proliferated throughout the world. And so the climate temperatures, when they say that, temperatures have risen 1 degree Celsius or something, 1.5, it's like, well, not here, not where I am. Where I am, it's getting colder. Most of the planet is getting colder and has been. And if you look back to the 70s, like I say, the cover of Time magazine in the late 70s had a cover once, Are We Entering a New Ice Age? This is an interglacial period. And after this cataclysm that's, we're on the cusp of, right? We're teetering on the brink of the next civilization ending, total civilization ending, near extinction event. Right? This isn't some fear-mongering. All right? That these people are ignoring the facts. They never mention that. Or if they do, they mention it in passing as if it's a subtle thing. But the CO2, man-made fossil fuels, we must eliminate. And it's like, well, then how are we going to grow crops, and what's going to keep the trees are the major life form on this planet. So in one breath, you're saying, oh my God, they're chopping down trees in the Amazon, which, by the way, is like so huge, so almost endless. You can't see the end of the trees down there. If you go down there right now, you will go like, my God, I didn't realize this place is so big. I did a show where I showed some pictures of that. Remember, I was involved in expeditions in Antarctica, the North Pole, the Himalayas, and the Amazon. And I have the footage, and I have all that information firsthand. Okay? That place is huge. So in one breath, they're saying, oh, my God, they cut down some trees because they're farming down there. Those people are trying to eat. And in the next breath, they're going, we got to get rid of CO2, so we kill all the trees. And then the vegans and vegetarians are like, yeah, we got a climate change, yeah. Let me give me some vegan, burger. Here's how to make a vegan hot dog. It's like, yeah, well, you'll be eating real hot dogs and real burgers because you're not going to have any vegan stuff if you lower the CO2 level. It's already only a trace fucking gas, you moron. The planet's not heating up. The planet's cooling. People don't get it. The reporting, they ignore the sun, and they ignore the climate that the major markets and airports are creating. Right? And satellites only, it's like, they're using these devices like when you go, now that they point at your head. They stole them from, the original concept was they were used in people who would do insulation in homes, right? It was a technology that you can point it at a wall and you can see where the cold or the heat was. So they would say, oh, there, you've got some problem there. We're going to have to insulate there, or there's some, air's getting in there, or, you know what I mean? Or heat's getting in there, when they were going to install insulation or an HVAC system, right? Let's open up that wall. There's something going on back there because we can see, temperature differential. And then they use that technology now. They point at people's head to see if they have a fever, if it's okay for you to go into the doctor's office or something. Right? But it's surface. They have no idea, it's just surface. It's not, And that's the same with the satellite. Satellite beams down. It's just taking a surface temperature. Well, did you ever walk on the sand on a beach on a sunny day in your bare feet? See, I spent a lot of time at the shore because when I was younger, I mean, I was a beach bum. You know, I loved the shore. Lived at both both shores in the U.S. And when I traveled to other countries, when I was in Australia, I went right to the beach. Right. Even Stradbroke Island, I went off the coast up in Brisbane. I went off out there, took a water taxi out there. I was the only guy, on the beach. But on a sunny day, you walk barefoot on the sand, right? If the sun's been out for a few hours, you'll literally burn your feet. You take a regular road, blacktop, asphalt, whatever you call it, right? On a summer day or spring, right? And walk barefoot on it. In some cases, if it's tar, if they put like some areas, they like fix little areas where it's like imperfections, they'll like to pour this tar. On that tar will actually like melt. It gets stuck to your foot or your shoe like chewing gum. The surface, right? And the sand is basically reflective and white, as opposed to the tarmacs on an airport or a blacktop road, right? So it's not even that. You walk on a hot sandy beach and you'll literally burn your foot. So a satellite shooting down, trying to take some kind of global energy, weather of the surface is totally. It's okay to be included in the mix if you want to, but you can't use it as an argument, and you can't use temperatures from major cities as opposed to. Let me put it this way. Here's an Earth view. Here's the United States, former United States. You see those, forget the clouds for a second. You see, if you look over in California, you see those like yellowy blobs, right? You look in like Utah, up at Salt Lake City, right? You look down in like Arizona, New Mexico, into Texas, Oklahoma, right? Look down in Florida. You can see the Gulf Coast. Then you could see like Orlando, and then you could see all along the East Coast, Miami, right? All the way up the coastal areas. All right? And the clouds are covering the other major cities. But what do you see everywhere else in between those blurbs? Those are the major cities. That's where that's where they take the temperatures from, right? Hi, this is CBS Miami. The weather. Here's the weather for, here's the weather in Austin today. The weather forecast in Austin today. It's going to be a high of such and such and blah blah blah. But what do you see when you look at the country? A lot of space in between. They're not taking the temperature in the places in between. They're not reporting those numbers in the UN IPCC report. Okay? The climate alarmists. Look at that swath of nothingness. Do you people see that? Right? Everything is wrong. I mean, that's what this thing is. Everything is fucking wrong. And you don't know what you don't know, and it's game over because of that. Because you are conditioned, indoctrinated, literally freaking brainwashed. And you won't accept it. Because there are people, took my coffee pot off my warmer. Can't say enough about that $9 thing. So you understand what I'm trying to say? So they make this be their burning issue, and it's based on a lie, right? It's based on a lie, falsehood, you know. In other words, they're excluding the key things that I brought up, right? And at the same time, they're excluding things like the magnetic field and, you know, like I say, and and of course, they don't even acknowledge the sun. And so this trace gas that happens that trees and plants need to survive and gives us oxygen and food and vitamin D, you know, in turn the sun does, you know. They don't get it. And so that's the puzzling part. So what are these people? Are they, you know, okay. So so let's get into the woo-woo, right? In the end of this show. So why would someone lie? You know, why would you indoctrinate children, condition people, and beat the drum night after night on the nightly news and have politicians standing on their soapboxes pushing this hypocrisy and lies? Like I say, the 99% nonsense. Right? Why would they be focusing everyone on something that didn't kill 99+% of the people and won't kill them? Why are they pushing some kind of thing that is a trace gas, as if it's like the ultimate existential threat to human life and existence in the planet, when it's basically, you know, as a trace gas, it's one of the most important things to give life to the planet and to help us breathe oxygen and eat food. Right? What are they? You know, why did the UFO phenomenon, you know, this whole expose that came out over the past couple of years, proof, right? And acknowledged by the government and the Pentagon, and why has that been ignored? So in other words, here you go. Okay, let's do the woo-woo. Let's do the ending. You know, Occam's razor. There's only one explanation. These people are fucking aliens, and David Icke has been right all along. Right? Maybe CO2 is like poisonous to them, even as a trace gas, and they're trying to eliminate it. Maybe that's killing them. You know, that's their kryptonite, right? And they are these aliens. I mean, as far out and crazy as that sounds, give me another explanation. Why would you lie? And what is this like?
Your papers, please. Like
they want to know everything about you and, like, you know, control you and your transit. You know, you need the letters of transit, like in, you know, some Bogart movie. You know, it's like, it's ridiculous. I mean, I can't even figure it out. You know.
Go ahead and shoot. You'll be doing me a favor. Of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, she walks into mine.
I mean, it's right out of a Bogart movie, right?
Your papers, please.
It's crazy. It's literally, like I said, come up with another explanation. Like I said, you know, and David Icke, he's been banned from the only place you get him is like if you watch that Inspired channel. I hate when they do these videos. You know, the guy seems like he's got his head in his right place and he's doing stuff for some of these people, but it's like they got their voice and then they got the, you know, one thing I can't stand is subtitles. Like I was watching some, I don't know what it was, Netflix or Amazon Prime show, Messiah it was called or something. It's not like a religious thing. It's some kind of weird thing, and the CIA and this guy, and I don't know. There must be some kind of twist to it. I haven't gotten to the end of it. But it's like it takes place in these foreign countries and they've got subtitles when they're in there because they're talking. It's like, why don't they just do like they used to do in the old movies, like just make them talk with an accent? You know what I mean? In the film, you know, in other words, it's suspension of disbelief is the idea when you make a film. Instead of making me have to read half the fucking show, I got to read something on the bottom. Do you know what I'm saying? So they could be authentic. No, that's not how the movie business works. The movie business and theater is suspension of disbelief. You let them talk. You know that they're in that foreign country, you give them an accent. Right? Or something. Or whatever. I mean, it's one thing if you just have a character enter a scene, you know, for like a minute, and then you put the subtitles on. The character comes in and then exits. It's like, that's fine. But I mean, you literally go through like, you know, 10 or 15 minutes taking place in a foreign country, and everything's in there in some screwed up language you don't understand. It's like, come on. Anyway. I bring that up, you know, I forget why even. Why did I bring? Oh, suspension of disbelief. You know, and this idea, but I don't know what's going on, you know? I really can't figure it out. And so that's why I'm saying, it was about this thing they put when they have like a David Icke speech, or like, you know, some of these other people who've been banned. These people cover them and they just show pictures of like beaches and forest or weird stuff. And then there's subtitles, but they're talking and there's subtitles as if, I don't know, that maybe it's some way they're getting around an algorithm to have this person on or something. I don't know. Right. But the idea is that, you know, my question is, you know, why would they ban these people? They must, you know, that's another question. Maybe they were right. You know, maybe they was right all along. I don't know. Come up with another solution. Why would, you know, when we're facing civilization's end, a possible near extinction event in our own lifetime, right? And then all this falsehood and focus on things that aren't really affecting people in the way you think. And I know there's people out there that go like, but what are you talking about? 600,000 people or 700? Yeah, it's 800, you know, there's 330 million people in the U.S., okay? 1% of the U.S. population is 3.3 million people. Okay? A third of 1% is 1.1 million people. Okay? So you're talking about a fraction of a percent of people. Okay, that is not, you know, grounds for this insanity and what's going on. And same with the world. There's nearly 8 billion people on the planet. You know, even several, you know, do you understand in the U.S. every year a couple of million people die of diseases, right? The leading cause of death is like heart attack. The second leading cause, according to CDC, is cancer, right? People are dying of diabetes. And it's people who have those same things that are the people who have died from this thing. So the question is, would they have died anyway? You know, give me some truth like that Lennon song. Like I'd love to see the numbers put up to show how many people died of heart disease and diabetes last year and how many people died of the thing, and to see if those numbers, you know, in other words, have the numbers stayed the same as they have been, the constants or the gradual increases, or have the numbers from certain things gone down. I remember last year there was a report that there were no flu cases in the UK, but there were all these other cases of this thing had skyrocketed. But there were 0 people apparently had the flu. So how is that possible? Does this thing destroy the flu, or is this just replace the flu? I mean, you have to ask these questions. It just doesn't make sense. And why aren't they telling us that? Because they want to push some kind of thing.
Your papers, please.
Some kind of bizarre thing like that. It just doesn't make sense. And so it comes down to it. It's like, okay, they tell us there's these aliens, right? The Pentagon and 60 Minutes and pilots, and now they have real photos that they acknowledge they're real. And then they're telling us some trace gas is like a problem, which it's not. It's like without it, we can't even live. And they want to get rid of it, and it's the only thing that, like, you can't even have a fire truck or an ambulance because Tesla, batteries and stuff won't power those things. And like I tried to tell people, and people say, well, yeah, you could put enough dude, there's better batteries now. Yeah, but you got to charge a battery, right? And how do they charge? How do we get electricity in the world, in the U.S.? In France, they got a lot of nuclear. But in the U.S., it mostly comes from natural gas and coal in a lot of parts. There's some places get their hydroelectric, from dams and stuff like that. But solar and wind aren't. Do you ever see like some of these wind farms? They're like, they've totally destroyed the landscapes. I mean, it looks it's insane. It's the ugliest thing in the world. And then they never show you the windmill graveyards when these things break down, because they don't fix them, because no one wants to. They've changed hands so many times. They've been bought and sold like through Wall Street, right? Financed and refinanced and weird deals and tax breaks. They used the government, under the Obama administration, there was like $1 million tax credit for this, that, the other. And they were traded, through exotic means. And so there are these, they only have a life expectancy, maximum of 20 years, but some of them break down in 10 or, whatever. And so these things, there's like graveyards of these things. And the same with the solar panels. And then to create them, it takes cranes and carbon-based fuels to forge, and the plastics are a byproduct of fossil fuels and carbon-based fuels and refining of oil. You see what I mean? They don't tell you any of this stuff. They're lying to you, right? And like in the northern latitudes, when it's cold, like you should see the coal trucks that go up and down my street, or look at a rail line. It's all these trucks. I was talking to somebody on the phone, and they were like out for a walk. They were picking up a Sunday paper yesterday in a different city. And it's like, I said, what's all the noise? And he goes, it's like an endless rail. And she said all it was coal cars, like all these train cars, and they were all filled with coal. And she said it was endless. Yeah, I said it's wintertime. They're going to all, that's how we heat. And, all that fracking that people were against, these so-called people were against fracking. Harris, the giggling Harris came out, Kamala Harris, and she said, I'm definitely against, we got to stop fracking. Well, a lot of this natural gas, which is like the primary source of electricity in the U.S., a lot of that comes from fracking. And it gets cold in half the country. And last year, the cold, the vortex went all the way down to wreaked havoc in Texas. Right? Years and years and years ago, before anybody talked about, global warming or any kind of stuff like that, when they were still talking about are we in for a, is the earth, cooling? Are we in for another ice age back in the 70s and stuff? There were like freezes that the orange crop in Florida like froze. You see, if you live long enough, you know these stories, right? Or if you have parents, they'll tell you that were cognizant, aware of the world, when they were younger. They could tell you these things, or grandparents, right? There was the Great Johnstown flood occurred like 3 different times. Once in the 1800s, before any of this stuff, in the early part of the 20th century. And in the 70s, it killed 2,200 people. It was like one of the worst flood disasters, of all. And that's like in recent, fairly recent history. People don't talk about that stuff, It's weird. And so, you don't know what you don't know. And in some cases, for a lot of people, everything you know is wrong. And that's like a bizarre statement, but it's true. Everything you know is wrong. And no one's offering us any explanations. It's like, give us some truth, or at least come up with some counter argument, because everything they're saying you can poke 5, 6, 7, a dozen holes through it. I'd love for someone to say, "Oh, hey, Tony, you missed. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4 things. Let me explain exactly what you need to know. You missed. You're not thinking right. You need to understand this, that, and the other." I'd love to hear somebody say that. Instead, they're saying,
Your papers, please.
And I'm going, why? Right? There's been disease in the world since the beginning, In fact, one could argue, that's the basis, that's the primary life form on the planet, is bacteria. We're filled with bacteria and stuff like that. We exhale bacteria and virus all the time. It's all over. It's everywhere. It's microscopic. You can't see it. It's in the air. That's how people become. That's, what natural immunity and herd immunity is about, right? Is exposure to these things, right? So there's some kind of game being played. So I don't know what the game is, and
It's the holiday season.
It's the holiday season. Let's not deal with it. So
Good morning.
Good morning. That show is probably a downer for some people, but so what? There's my holiday shirt. Order that shirt because you want to wear that, not just on Christmas or New Year's. Just, you want to wear it anytime during
It's the holiday season.
But all the other stuff, go to rockflux.com and check it out. Get my book, get my shirts, go to Great Solar Stuff. And when you have a power outage, there's some stuff there that could literally make your quality of life through that thing bearable. I'll talk